Right, so this 20 marker for superpowers is looking at to assess to what extent superpowers' rising demand for physical resources has led to both environmental and political challenges. 20 mark questions mean you have to write three-piece paragraphs, and this is roughly how I would structure my answer. So paragraph number one, I'd look at political challenges. So describe a political challenge. Think about Russian gas in Europe. Okay, provide data. 40% of gas in the EU prior to Russia invading Ukraine in 2022 was from Russia. Okay, so in Germany it was over 50%. So in the analysis part, you'd have to explain the geopolitical impacts of energy insecurity in Europe. How has Russia bullied Europe around, basically? How has Russia forced Europe's hand? And what are the political challenges with that? Well, one of them is in 2014 that Russia illegally annexed Crimea. No one really batted an eyelid. Um, and so Russia tried again in 2022, and now we've got an all-out war. So it's clearly showing there's massive political implications here of being so dependent on another power for its fossil fuels. However, you could also argue that energy insecurity in Europe does bring benefits. There our reliance on Russia was clearly sped up our transition towards renewables, because we can't leave Russia dictate the rule of the redraw the laws of international relations. So Europe wants to be carbon neutral by 2050. Well, they're going to have to up their game in terms of renewables, in terms of decarbonizing our grid, and in doing so, becoming less reliable on Russia. Okay, so it does bring benefits. But do you think these outweigh the costs? Second paragraph, you look at environmental challenges. Think about air pollution is an obvious one. Demand for physical resources. We pollute the atmosphere hugely, whether that's because we use fossil fuels or in mining. Provide data. Well, there's 2 million people who die every year in China just because of the poor air quality. And explain what the impacts of anthropogenic climate change is. So what are the anthropogenic or human-made enhanced greenhouse gas effects? Impacts. Okay, talk to me about the impacts these have. However, you could also argue that we are rising to the challenge. Climate change action is getting bigger and bigger. It's gaining momentum. We're trying to mitigate climate change more and more with things like electric vehicles. In the UK will be pretty much compulsory by the year 2030. We're moving towards renewables. We're trying to use more geothermal. We're trying to put a lot of our engineering skills to reduce our impact on the environment. Okay, do you think that's enough? Is your evaluation part, basically. And your third paragraph, you could try and link both and say, well, actually, it can do both at the same time, and that leads to basically a catastrophe. So think about the Maldives. Environmentally, well, it's 4 meters high in altitude. Environmentally, the islands are going to disappear. So it's going to wreck ecosystems, food chains, coral reefs are going to bleach, which a lot of about 1 out of 7 people on our planet rely on food from coral reefs. It's going to have a huge environmental impact. Politically, well, people from the Maldives are going to have to move. And when you think of how the world thinks of migration, where they're going to go, who's going to host them, what are the impacts of this, what are the impacts of that? So it's a geopolitical and environmental disaster in the making. I think two values are the same. What happens? You could also balance that by saying, well, actually, we're doing quite a fair bit. COP26, COP27 in Sharm el Sheikh in Paris, we agreed to pay compensation to low-income countries and emerging economies. High-income countries are providing funding, advice, support, etc. But ultimately, is it enough? And that would be for you to say. Okay.